Hey everyone, this is Luca with Capivora Group. Today I'm going to be walking you through how to build a basic high-level real estate cash flow. Whether you're building a case study for school or a job interview, this should get you covered and this should get you sorted. So I'm excited to dive into this and jump into it. Before I do, I will just say if you're looking to kind of analyze a real property, this is too high level of a model to do that, but I will be building out a series here on YouTube where I will build out a full-fledged cash flow for every kind of asset class. So definitely stay tuned and watch for that, and that will be useful enough for you to kind of build your own model for a real deal. Having said that, if you're watching this a day before any job interview or a case study, or an hour before a case study or job interview, let's dive into it. This should get you all the way there. When I was hiring, I did review a lot of kind of case studies, and I know what people look for when you're doing this. So I'll give you a few tips and tricks to stand out as well, and hopefully that'll set you on your path. So let's jump into it. So you guys see my screen here. What we're going to do first is build out 3 separate tabs. So typically in these models, that's what you want to do. You don't want to keep it in one tab. It gets a little bit too messy. And so the first thing you want to do that'll set you apart, because a lot of people will build into one tab, build it out in 3 separate tabs. I'm going to call this the summary tab. I'm going to call my second sheet my assumptions. And I will call my third sheet my cash flow. So first thing we're going to do is talk about the assumptions. Let me zoom in quickly here. So when you're setting up your assumptions sheet, it's obviously pretty kind of standard. There's really not too much to it. Either the case already gives you a assumptions tab or assumptions sheet, or they'll make you kind of build out your own and they give you a PDF. So in this case, let's pretend we're building out our own. We'll call this the gross potential rent, and we'll call this 120,000 per year. Now we'll pop down here and do vacancy and credit loss. We'll call that 5%. Then we'll pop down here and do OPEX, or operating expenses. Let's call this 40,000 per year. Then we will come down here and do our hold period, 3 years. Maybe we'll specify that. Maybe we'll say years, so it's kind of clear. And then we'll look at our exit cap rate and our sales costs. Those go hand in hand. We will also look at our market inflation rate, and then our OPEX inflation rate, and then finally our purchase price. So like I said, when you're setting this up, pretty self-explanatory, usually copying it over from a PDF or it's set up for you. The one thing that's really important with the assumptions tab is the formatting. So we're going to use real estate formatting best practices. The first thing we're going to do is clean this up. So what I'm doing here is just making sure that this is all of these kind of words fit the cells. Alt-HOI will help you get there on Windows. If you're using a Mac and you're going into this line of work, you won't be using a Mac for long. So don't get too used to the Mac shortcuts. I don't know what they are. You'll have to figure that out on your own. But yeah, Windows, Alt-HOI. Alternatively, you can kind of pop up here, and I think you can do this on Mac as well, and just hit kind of a double click there, and that'll do it for you. You'll notice as soon as I typed these in, I converted them to dollar amounts. That's really key as well. The vacancy and credit loss here, we converted to a percentage. And what we're going to do is just make it 2 decimals as well. Alt-H0 will do that for you, or this button right here. So there you go. The exit cap rate is going to be 7%. What we'll do is just copy this over for formatting, call it a 7% cap rate, a 2% sales cost. Our market inflation, let's call this 3%, and 3% on OPEX as well. And then for our purchase price, let's call our purchase price 800,000. And to format into dollar amounts, you can either pop into here and hit the dollar figure here, and then the decimals. Alternatively, if you do want to use shortcuts, Control-Shift-4 will do that, and then Alt-H9 twice. So that's what I'm doing there. And then great. So now we've got all of that set up. We've got our dollar amounts in dollar amounts. We've got our percentages in percentages. A lot of times what you'll see is you'll actually get a case study and they'll give you, the numbers set up like this, but they'll give you some wacky formatting. So maybe they'll do this, or they'll do this or something like that. And you have to actually go in and change the formatting. So definitely pay attention to that. It's one of the things that make you stand out. The second thing that's important on this and that really kind of makes you stand out is using industry best practices in terms of color coding. So you might not think it's important, but it is really key. So what we do in real estate is if it's a formulaic cell or formula, it's black. If it's a hard-coded number, it is blue. So what I'm going to do down here, these are all hard-coded numbers. I'm going to pop in, and I've got a custom shortcut to change this to a blue font. I believe it's Alt HFC if you don't have a custom shortcut. Alternatively, you can pop in here and hit blue. So that's one way to do it. What I'm going to do here as well is just put a little border around it, nothing crazy, but a border just makes it nice and clean, and I like using it. You can also go with a thick border if you prefer, but I like this one. So again, the border and the other kind of formatting stuff, you can get rid of these grid lines as well. Some people prefer to do that. I personally do, but I'm going to keep them on for this. But the main thing is that you have this set up in blue. That shows that you kind of know what you're doing, and that'll make you stand out from a lot of other people who aren't going to do that. So, okay, great. Our assumptions tab is set up. I'll walk you through this really quickly as to what kind of each number means. So our gross potential rent, our yearly rent at the start of the model. So in year one, our yearly rent is 120,000. A lot of times you'll see this broken down in kind of more complex models or in case studies on a tenant by tenant basis. If that is the case, that's fine. For simplicity here, we're just calling it one line gross potential rent of 120,000. Vacancy and credit loss is just a percentage of the potential rent, and essentially it's just used as a contingency in case one of the tenants kind of vacates or there's bad debt, they fail to pay, something like that. 5% is pretty standard. OPEX, or operating expenses, what does it cost to run this property on a yearly basis? Again, these are usually broken out on a line-by-line basis. We're lumping them into one line here at 40,000. Our hold period, in other words, when are we selling this thing? Our exit cap rate, which is one of the key kind of numbers here. So your NOI divided by your exit cap is what gives you your sales price. So very important number. Sales cost, any broker fees or anything like that, we'll add that into the cash flow at the end. The market inflation rate, this is kind of the rate that your rent inflates at. So it's 3% year over year. And then same thing down here for OPEX. And then our purchase price here, we're calling it 800K. So we've got that all set up. Let's now pop into the cash flow. Again, I'll zoom in slightly here. First thing we're going to do is set up the years. So one thing that we can do to keep it clean as well, you can usually just start your models in B2. So I'll copy this over and we'll expand that. So let's pop into the cash flow now. Again, we'll start on B2 and we'll toggle this to be year. And now we will jump in here and set this to year one. The second cell will be that cell plus one. And what we can do now is just kind of drag that across. So if you take the cell, shift and then right on your arrow keys and then control R, you can pop that open. Alternatively, if you don't want to use shortcuts, you can take the black corner here and drag it across out 6 years. So we don't need it going out 6 years. So in this case, we have a 3-year hold period. So we will actually just have it going out 4 years. And I'll explain why in a little bit. If you want to center these as well, you can certainly do that. So Alt HC centers them. If we go down here now and we look at rental income, our first year rental income will just be the 120,000 here. And then going forward, we want to inflate it at 3%. So we're going to take this cell, 120,000, times 1 plus the market inflation rate that we have down here. So 3%, close that bracket. There we go. And then we can copy the formatting over as well. You either format paint it or you can use these again. So that's great. Now you'll notice if we drag this over, this number is actually not going to grow. And the reason for that is because this cell, assumption C14, now becomes D14, now becomes E14. As you can see, D14 and E14, excuse me, have nothing in them. They're blank. So what we have to do is actually anchor in this cell C14. If we hit F4, the little dollar signs appear there and that cell gets anchored in. And now if we drag it across, it's an absolute reference to C14 and that doesn't move. That's great. So our rental income increases. Now if we look at vacancy and credit loss, and again, let's make the cell bigger. We can now take this times the vacancy and credit loss here, 5%. And again, F4 anchors it in. I can format paint this, or I can just use the dollar signs down here, but it's important that we do get the formatting. And then of course I dragged across there. So perfect. Then we will have our EGR, otherwise known as our effective gross revenue. That's great. And that'll just be essentially the rental income less the vacancy and credit loss. Now, one thing I should note, which I didn't do, is the vacancy and credit loss is actually negative. It's you're subtracting it from your rental income. So if I put negative there and then drag that across, perfect. And you'll see the red formatting. That's great. And then what I can do here is sum it. So I can either do sum of these two, and I get the answer, or I can hit Alt equals and it'll just sum the two above it. So perfect. And then a little border down here, never hurt anybody. I like that. I think it looks clean. So OpEx here, our OpEx number is 40K to start. And then we will use essentially the exact same kind of inflation formula, which is C8 times, 1 plus, and we'll pop into the assumptions tab here and use the OpEx inflation, anchor that in with F4, and drag it across once we've changed the formatting. Perfect. So the OpEx is in there, and that's great. So now we're kind of set on that front, and what we can look at now is our net operating income, our NOI. This is kind of one of the key line items here. So the NOI is essentially the effective gross revenue less your OpEx, and it comes out to that number. Now, what I'll do here is I highlighted it. You can hit this little bold cell here, alternatively Control B, just to bold it. It's kind of the most important, or one of the most important lines in the cash flow. So I think it's key to have in there as bolded, in my opinion, at least. So, okay, perfect. That looks nice. Now we will look at a couple things below the line, which is our purchase price, and then we'll have our sales price down here. Okay, so now let's take a look at a couple of lines below the NOI, which are the purchase price, which is what we're going to start with. So the purchase price is set to 800,000. Again, this will be negative. So once we pop in here, we can change this to a negative, and that's great. We have negative 800,000 here in year one. One quick thing I'll note is when you're building these models on a monthly basis, typically the purchase price will be in month 0, and then your model will start in year 1. Because this is an annual model, which I typically don't recommend, most real estate models, good real estate models are built on a monthly basis. For simplicity here, I'm building it on an annual basis. It's a lot simpler to build, and candidly, in a job interview or in a case study, if you build it on an annual basis, you can definitely get away with it, so to speak. As long as your model's functioning, it's clean, it looks good. You're not gonna get questioned too hard on the annual basis. Everyone understands that it's just easier to build, and that's candidly why you did it. So that's okay. But yeah, so in this particular case, when it's an annual model, we'll just have it in year 1. We can't have it in year 0. That's too big of a gap between year 0 and year 1. So the next thing we're going to set up is our sale, our terminal value. This is kind of integral to the model. Without it, you can't really get any returns. So let's set that up by having a little disposition section up here. And then here we will look at our gross sales proceeds, our sales cost, and then our net sales proceeds below. So for the gross sales proceeds, what we want to do for calculating our gross sales proceeds is essentially look at the forward-looking 12 months of net operating income at the time of sale. So in this case, our hold period is 3 years. We're going to be looking at our year 4 NOI and then divided by the cap rate. The reason we look forward is because real estate's forward looking. When people are buying this, they want to see, okay, I'm buying it in year 3. What is my first year of operations going to look like? And then they're going to base their kind of purchase price off of that. So that's why we use the forward looking 12 months. So we can set up a dynamic little formula here, nothing overly complicated, but we can say if this is equal to the hold period, and we got to anchor that in. So if my year is equal to the hold period, then I will take my NOI of the following year divided by the cap rate, which we also anchor it in. If it's not, then it's just 0, right? Simple enough. Perfect. We've got it formatted here already, and we'll just drag this across, and we see in year 3 gross sales proceeds of 1.155 million. and it's taking the year 4 NOI, which is fantastic, the forward-looking 12 months. In terms of the sales cost, another very simple formula. We just look at the sales cost here, 2%, anchor that in, times the gross sales proceeds above it. This should be negative, of course, as it's a sales cost. So let's make it negative. Oops. Drag that across, and perfect. And then in terms of our net sales proceeds, it's just the sum of those two. So Alt equals, and then drag across. We can have a little border here just to kind of set that apart. And that's great. So we've got purchase price of 800,000 and a sales price of 1.132 million in year 3. Looks like a relatively lucrative deal off the bat. So let's see what we have. We now have our cash flow. This will be the kind of final line that we have in the cash flow here. And it'll essentially be a sum of the NOI, the purchase price, and the net sales proceeds. We drag that across. That's a pretty good looking deal. You can have an if statement in here to say, only account for it if it's in year 3 or below, or you can just delete this out. It's up to you guys. If you want to delete this out, you can certainly do that. So, I'll build the if statement in there just to show you guys what it would look like, but it's essentially if this is smaller or equal to the hold period, then we take what we have. Otherwise, it's 0, right? Pretty simple. And that way you can kind of drag it out. But again, you can just delete this fourth cell out if you don't want to have an if statement in there. Perfect. So now that we've got that in there, we can calculate our IRR. So in terms of IRR, a simple IRR calculation looks like this. IRR, and just kind of look at the values, and we're getting a 34% IRR, which makes sense. It's a large profit in a short period of time. So that's great. This is a simple way to do it. This is okay. But one way that'll kind of make you stand out is if you use an XIRR function. So an XIRR function is essentially more precise because it looks at the actual dates as opposed to just hold periods. So the IRR looks at period 1, period 2, period 3, period 4. The XIRR looks at the actual dates and therefore is more precise. Again, this is a basic high-level model. You don't necessarily need to do it, but if you want to kind of show off a little bit of prowess, you can certainly do it. So you can have your kind of IRR down here. Again, if you are going to do that, I would actually go ahead and delete this. I'll keep it in here for now. But let's call this XIRR so it's not confusing. And for an XIRR, like I said, you do need dates. So you would have to come in here, layer in dates, and just go 2026 0101. And then here, an eDate formula, which takes that date and then pushes it out 12 months. We'll format paint it and drag that across. Beautiful. And then we'll pop in here, go XIRR, the values, and the dates. So in this particular instance, that'll give you the exact same returns. Obviously, because it's just kind of 12 months apart, there's no actual difference in dates between the year periods and the date periods. If this were on a monthly basis, you get a very different result. Or if these dates were different in that this was Jan 1, 2026, and this was, Feb or March 1 of 2027, then it would be different. In this case, you're going to get the exact same returns, but, it is something that you can kind of use to, show a little bit of, show off a little bit, so to speak. You can say, hey, I know XIRR is the right formula to use. And then if they say, well, why did you use XIRR? IRR would have done the same thing. You could always just say, yeah, I recognize that IRR would have done the same thing in this scenario because it's kind of 1 year apart. But the XIRR formula is the good formula to use, is the right formula to use. And so if any of the dates change or anything like that, the XIRR will pick up on that, whereas the IRR will not. So simple little explanation, but anyways, you can certainly use just the IRR formula and that'll be totally fine. You can get away with that. Perfect. So we've got that all set up now, and that's great. So we have our assumptions tab, we have our cash flow tab. For this video in particular, I'm not going to actually touch on the summary tab, but the summary tab is essentially a tab where you can lay out your return, so you can show the IRR and any other kind of return metrics that you have. That'll kind of be it for this video. I will get a lot more in depth in other videos. If there's any questions about kind of any of these formulas or any of these line items in particular, feel free to let me know. the last thing I'll say is one of the really good checks that you can do is just to make sure that this makes sense in terms of, there's kind of a few key numbers that we can look at. This IRR, right? This is 34% is a high IRR, but it makes sense because it's a 3-year span. If you were to get an IRR of like 400% or something like that, double check your numbers, right? Same thing with the exit assumption, the exit sales proceeds, the net sales proceeds here. I've had models that I've reviewed for people applying to a job where their purchase price is $800,000 and their net sales proceeds are $3 billion. You know, come on, look at it. Look at it. Does it make sense in 3 years to go from 800,000 to 3 billion? No, it doesn't. And so even if you can't figure out why that's wrong, just flag it, highlight it, leave a little comment. Hey, I recognize this is wrong. I can't figure out why, but I know that 3 billion is not the right number. And that shows that you're looking at it. You know the details of the case, and you recognize that there's no way that could jump up to $3 billion. So in this case, 1.13 totally makes sense as an exit value. An IRR of 34%, high, but it makes sense based on the difference between the purchase price and the net sales proceeds and the kind of short turnaround time. So that's it for me for this video. Like I said, I will layer in a bunch of other videos discussing a whole bunch of different concepts and building out these models in depth. But this is a really good basic one for any sort of case study or job interview. If there's any comments, feel free to leave them below. And thanks for watching.